Welcome to JumpStartYourLife.com. I'm Josh Sierba. I'm the founder of this website, and my heart and my passion is to really equip you and help you on the journey of emotional health and the journey of emotional intelligence. It's been a process for me in my own life, and I'll share some of my stories out of what we'll be talking about today, which is the value of focusing on emotional health. For me, I don't know how you are, but for me, I'm the kind of person where I need to understand the why behind doing something. If I don't understand the why, it's really hard for me to dive in and really sink my teeth into a process or even a project. It doesn't matter what it is. If I don't get that why, I'm going to be questioning, and it's going to be really hard for me to fully commit. So that's really the reason and the core message behind this video and this class is for you to understand the why of focusing on that emotional health and that process and growing in that area. What are the benefits, and quite frankly, how do you find those benefits and apply them to your own life? So we're going to hit a couple main things that where if you apply them and really begin to become aware of them, then you're going to grow by default. There's no way that you can learn some of these elements that we're going to go into here in a second and not grow as a byproduct of it. So without further ado, let's dive in. First one of being self-aware. Now, I know that those are closely joined as far as emotional health and being self-aware, but what does it actually mean to be self-aware, and why is that valuable in understanding that process of emotional health? Well, being self-aware could probably be its own class in and of itself, but in its simplest form is learning about yourself, what makes you tick, and your natural strengths and your natural weaknesses. We all have them. Doesn't matter who you are or where you are in life. We all have natural strengths and we all have natural weaknesses. And not only that, but learning how to be self-aware can help you prevent some of those strengths from becoming a weakness. Now let me explain. Everybody has those strengths. Everybody has the weaknesses. For me, I'll give you an example out of my own life. I am a person that likes to take risks. Now, that could look like a lot of different things in life. I'm not saying that I'm a cliff diver or anything like that, although it may be fun to try. I don't know. I've never done that. What I'm talking about is taking risks in life in the sense of either starting a new business or moving. My wife and I have moved across the country a few different places at different times in our life, and people go, man, I don't know how you do it. And for me, one of my strengths is I see risks as maybe less than intimidating as other people do. Now, how can that strength become a weakness? Well, quite simply is one of my weaknesses out of that strength is I can have a tendency to prematurely jump at things without really understanding what it is that I'm either committing to or what it really takes to be able to develop something or what that commitment, that long-term commitment actually looks like. And so I can prematurely jump into something because I'm willing to take that risk. And another weakness in that strength is I can have a tendency to burn out from an emotional capacity and just from overextending myself because I'm willing to say, I'm going to try this and I'm going to try this and we're going to do this and just really go for it. I have the tendency, which we're going to get into later in the class, and this specifically in burning out. But that's where a strength can become a weakness. So learning how to be self-aware is not just learning what your strengths are. That's the starting point. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? See, like some of my weaknesses are details in administration. I am so grateful for the people that are in my life that take care of those areas for me because I'm aware that it's a weakness. I'm trying to operate out of a weakness when I have to do that kind of stuff. So learning your strengths, learning your weaknesses is the first step. But then taking it a step beyond that is learning what it looks like for your strength to become a weakness. What does it look like when whatever that is for you is over flexed, let's call it, and you fall into a trap of letting that strength become a weakness for you. So that's one of the whys of when you grow in emotional health and really focus on that emotional intelligence. What you do is you learn how to do that. You learn what your indicators and your warning signs are. You You learn what it is that is really forced for you. What doesn't come natural? What are those weaknesses? And it's not that you just avoid them, but you learn how to lean into your strengths and really focus on those, because the reality is when you do that, the byproduct is that you're able to accomplish more and actually feel more fulfilled in life in focusing on your strengths, but being aware of your weaknesses. See, a lot of us, we try to operate and find our calling and our passions, really, unfortunately, leaning into our weaknesses because we don't know the difference between the two. So what comes naturally for you, what is almost like when people, maybe they compliment you and they say, man, you're so good at X, or for me, I don't know how you take this risk or that risk. Like, what is it a natural strength for you that you don't have to necessarily focus on or lean into? And then what are those weaknesses where, man, when you do those, it's like trying to learn Chinese or a new language every single time that you do it. It's just really hard, or it's frustrating. So that's one. Another one is it strengthens relationships. Now, it strengthens relationships in a lot of different ways, because one is, obviously, as you take ownership of your own emotional process and you grow in that process, then you're going to become more healthy and more connected to yourself. And so you're going to be able to be a better friend and more connected friend, and understanding the dynamics of relationships, all of that. But also there's this other side benefit of learning how to understand how your friends and the people that are in your life are wired. Now, I'm talking more than just, let's say, Myers-Briggs or DISCs or the Enneagram. Like, I'm a huge fan of all of the different tests that you can take. But even taking those tests, let's just say that you learn about yourself, but you also begin to learn about how the people that are in your life are wired. And why does that matter? How does that strengthen your relationship? Well, when you begin to learn how other people are wired, you actually learn how to love people better, because you learn what makes them feel loved. You learn what maybe makes them feel triggered, like what actually hurts them or shuts them down. You actually learn how to respond to people when they're at that place of being either hurt or triggered. See, growing in emotional health and intelligence, it helps more than just you. There is literally a ripple effect of positivity that comes from you pursuing this path of emotional health and growing in that emotional intelligence, with relationships being one of those aspects or elements, because it's impossible for you to become a worse friend by better understanding how people are wired and what makes them feel really loved and connected in relationships. So that would be another area, is understanding both yourself and what makes you feel loved and being able to communicate that. See, it takes emotional intelligence to be able to know, I feel love when someone does X, and I feel hurt when someone does X. More than just identifying that, being able to communicate that in a way that people are able to respond and adjust to. So as you start to do that, you feel empowered. You actually are able to be connected and present in relationships, and people have an opportunity to respond in loving you better, and so you feel more connected there as well. So there's a lot of layers that come into play with the benefit of focusing on emotional intelligence and getting healthy in those areas, and when it comes specifically to strengthening your relationships. You know, as another side note of that is it builds your self-confidence, quite frankly. And the reason is because growing in emotional health and focusing on that process, really what you're doing is you're learning how to love yourself. You're learning how to practically understand how you're wired and how you're made, which everyone is made unique and different. So you pursuing that path of understanding that, you're choosing to pursue a better understanding of yourself. And so you're choosing to love yourself at a greater degree than when you first start going down this path. And when you do that, you grow in self-confidence. Because when you learn more about yourself, when you learn more about emotional health, when you go down the rabbit trail of learning how to become healthier, then you are championing yourself. You are loving yourself. And I know that can be vague at times, but the practical application in that is when you love yourself, you are in a room. Let's just use a room as an example. When you're in a room and you really, really genuinely love who you are as a person because you understand how you're wired and you understand the dynamics of how other people are wired, and you feel really content and present with yourself, that as a byproduct is you're going to be confident because you're not as worried as for how people respond to you, whether or not what you say is right or wrong, whether or not you feel accepted by people. You know, the whole fear of man side of things, it fades away the more that you love yourself, because I'm sure that you're aware of the fact that where love is, fear cannot be. And so loving yourself, the more that you do that, the more these fears, the fear of rejection, the fear of man, all these different fears start to just fizzle away and fade out. Now, warning is it's a process, right? I mean, there's still areas of my own heart and my own life that I'm in process when it comes to those. But the why and the payoff and the benefit of really pursuing emotional health and emotional intelligence is learning how to love yourself better, and in that, growing more confident in who you are. Because it's really hard for you to celebrate something that you don't love, right? So choosing to love yourself is learning how to celebrate the good that everyone inherently carries in them. So speaking of the good that everyone carries inherently in who they are, that is oftentimes connected to your passions in life. And it's really hard for you to lock into and identify what those passions are without pursuing emotional health for a time being. Well, now let me clarify. Emotional health is really something that you pursue your entire life. And but there can be times where you're really leaning into it for certain time frames or sprints, let's call them, to strengthen certain areas of who you are. And doing that, it actually starts to help you identify the times that you feel really alive, that you feel really connected, that you can actually pinpoint, you know what, I am really passionate about that, whatever that is for you. Now, let me give you an example from my own life. Speaking. Now, I'm talking to the camera right now, but whether it's the camera or public speaking, just speaking in general, doing a podcast, which I've done a few times, I love speaking. I love communicating. And I didn't know that, and I didn't really connect to that until I started to pursue emotional health. And the reason is because in that pursuit, I began to learn how to love myself. I began to learn how to celebrate myself. I began to learn how to grow in confidence in the areas that are my strengths. See, communicating is one of my strengths. I still have to work on it. I still sometimes feel intimidated by it, etc. But it's one of my strengths, and it's also one of my passions. And I've only been able to find that by pursuing growing in emotional health and intelligence. So for you, it may be that you kind of understand what some of your passions are. Maybe you haven't pursued them in a long time, or maybe life has just gotten you to a point where it's not an option anymore, right? It's always an option, it's just a lower priority. So bumping that up in priority, just emotional health in general, the natural byproduct of that is you're going to start to access and find some of your passions that maybe have lied dormant for a little while. Now, being able to connect to and identify some of your passions is also critical for preventing burnout. And remember when I was talking about my strength of risk or willingness to take risk can sometimes lead to burnout? This is one that I unfortunately know all too well. But preventing burnout, the reason why I say preventing burnout and connecting to your passions and understanding yourself is because your passions, maybe let's say speaking might be a bad example for that passion. Another passion I have is working with wood and building things with my hands. Now that's not connected to speaking, but that's another one of my passions. It's one of the things that I really love and that I really enjoy. And I didn't know that until I went down this path. And what that does is preventing burnout. I'm able to actually see and learn some of my indicators, my burnout indicators. And when those start to flare up or come up, then I can become proactive in doing things like doing something with wood or working outside or doing different things. Maybe it's connecting to people that I haven't seen, or I've kind of become isolated in pursuing certain things in my life or trying to build certain things. Any of those are possibilities. And so learning how to be self-aware and learning how to become confident and connect to passions is all part of that process of going, oh, wow, I'm overextending myself before I crash and burn, right? That's the whole goal, is to circumvent that burnout. It's a lot harder to come back from burnout than it is to manage yourself in a healthy way to prevent it. Trust me, I've been there on both sides. It's easier to do the latter than it is to try to dig out of a place of burnout. So pursuing emotional intelligence, you learn how to not burn out. And if you have lived any kind of period of life where you have had to lean into something for an extended period of time, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, another one is, for some people, it's really hard and really awkward, and that is confrontation. Let me even extend it to healthy confrontation. Trust me, it's possible. Now, confrontation in and of itself, like that word, is not something that a lot of people go, oh, I can't wait to have. Actually, as a matter of fact, if you're one of those people that can't wait to have confrontation, that could be an indicator that you're reacting out of pain and wanting to emphasize or lean into your ability to cut people down with your words. I'm not judging you at all. I'm just saying that it's actually unhealthy to want confrontation. Healthy people don't go looking for it. But equally so, healthy people don't go avoiding it. And it doesn't have to shut you down or paralyze you or make you feel a ton of anxiety. There's actually ways to do confrontation in a healthy way that enables you to have a voice in a relationship and communicate the things that you need to communicate without feeling shut down, or that your only solution is to just, for a lack of better words, find the easy way out, to not have that confrontation with somebody. That's not the goal, right? So pursuing emotional health and growing your emotional intelligence equips you to be able to have a voice in life, which leads to being able to find ways to communicate your emotions and find ways to confront people in a healthy way that's not cutting or condescending, but it is addressing things that maybe isn't so fun to talk about or address, but you're doing it out of a good heart, out of a healthy heart, out of a healthy posture, rather than it being really reactionary. So those are some of the really big main things of the why behind pursuing and focusing on emotional health, is learning how to be self-aware. I almost forgot that one. Learning how to be self-aware. I mean, that is kind of the summary of all of this, right? Is learning how to be self-aware, identifying your strengths and your weaknesses, learning how to circumvent your strengths from becoming a weakness, strengthening your relationships, both in growing and learning how to identify your own wiring and how you're made, but also how other people are made that are in your life, and how to be able to love them and show intentionality to them. It builds your self-confidence and grows in your ability to be okay with you because you're loving you. It helps you unlock and identify your passions. It prevents burnout. And it puts you on the path of pursuing healthy confrontation. So those are the core elements of the why behind pursuing emotional health. Now, if you're interested in really taking some of those elements and aspects to the next level, it's really easy, because I've put together the 5 keys to emotional health that I feel are some of the fundamental 5 things that you really need to start to access all of those. And it's quite simply, believe it or not, as simple as journaling, how your childhood affects your adult life, the different things within that. There's a lot of nuances within that. Identifying and overcoming unhealthy cycles, the value of feedback, and quite frankly, why sometimes it's harder for us to pursue the healthy options than it is the unhealthy options. Now, those are the 5. Breaking into each one of those, you all know that journaling is important, but why is that important for emotional health? Well, there's certain ways to journal that actually unlock your emotions and give you access to some of these things that you can't do without journaling. The childhood aspect, well, that helps you identify root issues. See, most of our problems, you want to call them, or feeling stuck or emotionally trapped as an adult are a byproduct of some of our childhood experiences. So we go into identifying some of those root issues and flushing them out. The unhealthy cycles. Now, those can be attached to some of those root issues, but the unhealthy cycles are a lot of times subconscious. Like, most of us don't go out of our way going, how can I create a really unhealthy cycle in my life so I can feel super trapped and powerless? So we go into, how do you identify those? And then what do you do about them when you identify them? The value of feedback. Not just the value of feedback, but what kind of questions do you ask? If you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get the answers that you need to actually grow in life. So going into the actual questions that you need to ask for that really good feedback. And then, why is it hard? Like, being aware of the why in that area actually empowers you and strengthens you to be able to pursue the health, because you're aware of certain aspects that create challenges and tension in relationship, and what to do with those tensions, and why maybe it feels like you're wanting to pursue health but people in your life aren't, and what to do about that, etc. So if you're interested in that, you can just click the link that's on this page to learn a little bit more about that course itself. And my heart is for you to be equipped within that. So I'm literally just giving it away for $10. Cut and dry, super simple, $10. You get the 5 core things that we go into so you can start to pursue this. Now, if you haven't also already taken the emotional age quiz, I encourage you to do so. That is also on this page, where it's 26 questions. It gives you a pulse on your the level of emotional intelligence. What we do is we factor in your current age, and then the results are your emotional age. And you're looking at the 2 of those, how closely they're aligned or misaligned. And it either lets you know that you've really pursued some of this stuff and you're strong in emotional intelligence, or maybe, like most of us at some point, you have a good foundation to work with, but there may be areas for you to focus and grow in. So those are the main things that I would encourage you to do from here. Is think about the whys. Like, because without those whys, it's going to be really hard for you to continue to pursue this journey or this process of emotional health. And then if you haven't, take the emotional age quiz to find out where you're at. It's a great starting point to give you a pulse on understanding where you're currently at. And if you're interested in really unlocking some of those areas that you understand the concepts of what we touched on, but you don't really know the how-tos behind them, then take the course. You get access to all the content immediately and for life. You can revisit it. You can share it with a friend. Again, my heart is to get this stuff out. So $10, you get full access, and I would encourage you to take that step at a minimum, because you'll be really surprised at some of the subtle nuances that'll make a big difference in your life.